The untouchable True School Sports Empire proudly presents something the boxing game's been missing. Hey, what's going on? It's your boy BT, and I came here to talk some boxing with the thousands of True School Sports subscribers. Now, I know this is the video you guys have been waiting for ever since this happened on Saturday between Canelo Alvarez and Demetrius Andrade. I know for a fact that this is the video you guys have been waiting for, so you got to give the people what they want, and that's what we're going to do. Now, before I even get into what happened between Demetrius Andrade and Canelo at their press conference, let me preface everything I'm going to say by first saying this, because I really think sometimes on YouTube, a lot of people misunderstand me. They mistake my, I'm a very passionate boxing fan, so sometimes people have misconceptions of me when I speak about certain fighters. Now, look, when it comes to Canelo Alvarez, I do not for a second like to disrespect Canelo Alvarez, because I love boxing, and Canelo Alvarez, for the business of boxing, is very good. I've seen evidence of that with my own eyes. 70,000 people plus in the Cowboy Stadium. Lots of excitement, lots of attention, lots of people have become fans and are becoming fans because of Canelo Alvarez. So I don't like to disrespect somebody that's doing good for the sport that I love so intimately and so deeply. So let me first preface everything I'm going to say by first saying that. And let me get into what transpired at the press conference between Demetrius Andrade and Canelo Alvarez, because this has been years in the making. Demetrius Andrade has been calling out Canelo Alvarez for 6 years. Canelo Alvarez has been avoiding him blatantly for 6 years. I don't care if you say that Demetrius Andrade hasn't fought nobody. I don't care if you think he's boring. I don't care if you don't like his style. I don't care if you think he's a C-class fighter. Fuck what you think. We go by the facts. That man has blatantly avoided this man time and time again. And this was another instance of that. So the press conference starts off by Demetrius Andrade, in a very similar fashion to when he remember when he pulled up on the Charlos years ago. Similar fashion to that. He asked a simple question. He asked Canelo Alvarez very respectfully. There was no disrespect in the way he asked the question. There was no malice in the way he asked the question. He actually came out quite friendly when he asked the question. He simply said, "Look, Canelo, when can me and you put something together?" And he said, "Congrats on your victory." He even said I was a big fan. So all that kind of stuff. And Canelo, in a very cocky way, responded by saying, "I know you're a big fan." And then he said that he recited the same bullshit talking points that people in my comment section have been reciting for years anytime we talk about this fight. He says, "You're a champion, but you haven't fought anybody. You haven't fought anybody." And that's when things started to escalate slowly but surely. The minute Paul Andrade, who's a friend of the channel, shout out to Paul Andrade, heard this, Paul Andrade started saying, "You ran from him at 154, you ran from him at 160. And those are not opinions. Those are not his feelings talking. Those are undisputed facts. Canelo Alvarez had a chance to fight Demetrius Andrade for the WBO world title at 154. And what did he do? He decided to fight James Kirkland at Minute Maid Park in Houston and cherry pick him. Then he waited for Demetrius Andrade to get stripped of the belt due to inactivity and nobody wanting to fight him and promotional issues. And he fought Liam Smith at Cowboy Stadium for that same vacant title. So that was strike one. Strike two was when in 2019 he had a chance to fight Demetrius Andrade for the undisputed titles at 160. And when asked about that, he said, "I'm not going to fight him because he's boring and I like fights with action." And then he fought Kovalev instead. So he ducked him there. That's strike two. Strike three came earlier in fight week when he did an interview with Brian Custer. And Brian Custer started throwing names out there of fighters he'd want to fight. He could answer yes or no. He said Jamal Charlo, he said yes. David Benavidez, he said yes. Caleb Plant, he said yes. Even Earl Spence, he said yes. But when it came to Demetrius Andrade, all the talking points, all the excuses. He doesn't fight with nobody. He doesn't have this resume. So look, let's just be real and call it for what it is. Canelo Alvarez has blatantly shown many times that he doesn't want this fight, that he's ducking this fight. He's clearly intimidated by the boxing skills and the attributes that this guy brings to the table, being 6'1", agility, having a lot of agility, 6'1", can punch from all kinds of angles. Had got respectable punch power in both hands. Canelo don't want those problems. He just had, listen, he was having problems with Demetrius Andrade light, Billy Joe Saunders, the bootleg Demetrius Andrade. You know, he basically fought a less awkward, less explosive, less athletic, shorter Demetrius Andrade, and he was having fits in that fight. What do you think Demetrius Andrade would do with him? Let's continue. So, in watching this, right, when I was watching this whole press conference, I couldn't help but think about the scene in Rocky 3 when Mr. T ran up on Rocky demanding a fight. You know, going up to Rocky and demanding a fight, and Mick tells Mr. T, "You ain't getting no shot," you know? And it's the same thing. You know, Rocky, in that case, was the A side. Rocky was the guy that was dictating terms, and Mick told Mr. T, the guy that was on the come up, the guy that was very dangerous, very feared, and very avoided, that he didn't want no smoke with Mr. T. So it's almost like it's art. That was art imitating life, because here we have that same scenario playing out many years later. You know, and there's so many things. I've watched this clip of Canelo Alvarez and Demetrius Andrade so many times. There's so many things that I've noticed every time I watch it. And the first thing I noticed, and nobody's talking about this. The two things nobody's talking about in the interaction between Boo Boo Andrade and Canelo Alvarez is that basically Canelo Alvarez is the one who escalated everything. He was the one who escalated everything. You know, he was the one that delivered the first "fuck you" to Demetrius Andrade's father. He disrespected this man's dad, which is the biggest, in my opinion. That is the biggest thing. That's the worst form of disrespect you can do is to disrespect somebody's father. And you know, he showed who he was in this instance. In this instance, Canelo Alvarez, in English, showed the world who he truly is. Because I've known for a long time. I've known for a long time from watching his Spanish interviews, that he's not this politically correct fighter that he presents himself as. I always knew he was a dickhead. Just from watching his Spanish interviews, he's always been a trash talker. He's always been someone that has a lot of things to say in Spanish. But now that his English is getting better, you're starting to see that now more with his English. And he showed who he was in this interaction. He showed who he was, and who he is, and who he's always been is an arrogant, spoiled man who thinks he's above the competitive integrity of boxing. He thinks he's above the competitive integrity of boxing. Demetrius Andrade has been a world champion in every weight class Canelo's ever fought in. At the world level. He's been a world champion at 154. He's been a world champion at 160. And I don't understand these ridiculous double standards when it comes to these Canelo fans, because one of the main speaking points I always hear from these Canelo fans is that Canelo Alvarez is fighting champion after champion. So you guys are telling me, when you're arguing with me and you're debating with me, that Canelo Alvarez is fighting champions, you're saying that belts don't matter. But then when you get Demetrius Andrade to come to the table, now all of a sudden belts don't matter. Now all of a sudden being a champion doesn't matter. It's a bit of a double standard. And you know what? I didn't want to go down this path. I really never wanted to. I didn't want to go down this path, but I have to really just be honest and objective here. You guys know, when it comes to me, go look at my track record, go look at my videos, go look at who I presented myself to be on YouTube these last 5-6 years. I have never been one to play the race card. I'm not these LDBC channels. I'm not, you know, those guys. But when it comes to Demetrius Andrade, what else could it be? What else could it be that's preventing him from getting this fight? Because I'll tell you one thing's for sure and two things for certain. It's not that he's a bad fighter, because we know that's not true. Yeah, we know that's not true. All you got to do is just go look at his amateur pedigree. You know, U.S. amateur champion. World, I mean, not U.S. amateur champion. World amateur champion, U.S. Olympian, multiple national Golden Gloves champion, 2-division champion, undefeated, barely ever loses a round. It's not because he's not a champion, and it's not because he's not a good fighter. And you can't say, and you can't bring up the fact that he doesn't have any money or that he doesn't bring money to the table, because that's irrelevant. Because Canelo Alvarez has reached that stage in his career where he is the biggest fighter in boxing. He is gonna make money, and he's gonna sell tickets no matter who he fights. He put 15,000 in the Hard Rock Stadium when he fought Avni freaking Yildirim, and he would have put more if they would have actually opened up more of the stadium. He just put 70,000 in Cowboy Stadium fighting Billy Joe Saunders. Don't tell me that Boo Andrade can't get this fight because Canelo Alvarez, you know, he doesn't bring any money to the table. That's null and void. Canelo Alvarez is the biggest money-making machine boxing has to offer at this point. So that's bullshit. He doesn't want to fight him because he's intimidated by him. And yes, I said it, he's intimidated by him. You know what I'm saying? Like he's intimidated by him, Canelo Alvarez, and he showed who he truly was. You know, the biggest and hold on before I move on to my next point, going back to the race issue, I don't like using and playing the race card because I think it's the biggest pussy move you can do in life is use that to your is play that card. But honestly, when you look at everything objectively, what else could it be? What other reasons is Demetrius Andrade not getting this fight? It can't be, listen, it can't be because he's not a good fighter. It can't be because he's not a world champion. It can't be because there's not enough money on the table for that fight because Canelo Alvarez, you know, he makes a lot of money. He's the face of boxing. You know, and you know, he's the biggest money making machine in the sport. I don't know. I don't know, man. I'm not ruling out the fact that it could be a race thing. Maybe Canelo Alvarez doesn't want to fight any slick black fighters because the last time he fought a slick black American fighter, we saw what happened. He looked like a freaking D-level fighter against Floyd Mayweather. So I'm going to leave it at that. I won't get too much further into it, but I just wanted to throw that out there because of the fact that I am starting to give it some consideration. I am. Because what else could it be? And listen, before any of y'all start flapping your gums saying, oh, True School's just saying this to get views, I don't give a fuck about the views. I never cared about views. I'm just telling y'all right now, what else could it be? You know? The biggest disgrace in this whole thing, it actually wasn't even Canelo, to be honest with you. The biggest disgrace in this whole interaction was actually Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn was the biggest disgrace in this. And listen, I didn't learn anything new about Eddie Hearn that I didn't already know when it comes to Demetrius Andrade and Canelo, because when Demetrius Andrade fought Liam Williams, I was there. I was there in the flesh at the Hard Rock Casino in Hollywood, Florida, in South Florida. And my dad, Pops, y'all can go see the video. Pops put that pressure on Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn in the post-fight interview, he was over there talking about, you know, he wants to get all these other fights for Demetrius Andrade. He mentioned Golovkin, he mentioned Charlo, he mentioned Munguia, Murata, but he mentioned every name but Canelo. And my Pops was putting that pressure on him saying, get Canelo in there, get Canelo in there. And Eddie Hearn from the ring, from where we were sitting, from the ring, he responded to Pops and he said, wrong weight, insinuating that it was the wrong weight class, which basically means he doesn't want to make the fight because Eddie Hearn is promoted. He promotes both fighters, but obviously Canelo Alvarez is higher on the priority list because Canelo Alvarez makes more money. So there's a conflict of interest there, and Eddie Hearn doesn't want to make these fights. He's the biggest disgrace in this whole thing because Eddie Hearn is Demetrius Andrade's promoter, and he's Canelo's promoter. And this is a good fight for boxing. I'm not saying it's got to happen next, but it's got to happen soon. And he told his own fighter to get out the press conference room? Are you serious? He told his own fighter to get out the press conference room, you know? And Canelo just sits there and runs his mouth like a pompous, you know, jackass. I mean, come on, man. Eddie Hearn, I used to really like trust me, 5 years ago, 4 years ago, I used to really like Eddie Hearn. And I met him in person a couple of times. I've even interviewed him. I don't think Eddie Hearn's a bad guy. I respect his ambition and his grind for boxing. I love what he's done for the sport. But you know, the last couple of years since he's been in America, I really have just been turned off of Eddie Hearn, you know, because he clearly doesn't want to make this fight happen. There's a conflict of interest, and you know, I feel like he's failing Demetrius Andrade in more ways than one. You know, I know he said in the past it's the hardest to make a fight for Demetrius Andrade, but at the same time, he's not doing Demetrius Andrade any favors by telling him to get out of the press conference room, by telling my father in the crowd that Demetrius Andrade's at the wrong weight, when Eddie Hearn knows better than me and everybody watching this video that Demetrius Andrade has already said he will go to 168 to fight Canelo. He'll do that, you know, because he's willing to test himself and show that he's that great, you know. And everybody always says Demetrius Andrade needs to fight Charlo. I'm going to pick apart everybody's rebuttals and what they're saying Demetrius Andrade should do, because I think that this is the time for that. This is a long, drawn-out video. When it comes to Demetrius Andrade, people say Demetrius Andrade should fight Charlo, right? Okay. Jamal Charlo won't even... Forget Demetrius Andrade. Jamal Charlo won't even fight anybody who's worth a damn. He's fighting Juan Montiel's next fight. A guy whose claim to fame is beating a shot James Kirkland. Jamal Charlo is the same guy that went up on Instagram Live talking about we blackballed Demetrius Andrade. We're not fighting him. So he, by his own admission, he doesn't want to fight Demetrius Andrade. He don't want to fight him. So X him out the equation. Triple G, all right? Fantastic fighter, you know, whatever. Fantastic fighter. Ideally, aside from Canelo, this would probably be the most realistic fight because Boo Boo Andrade and Golovkin are the two best fighters at 160, you know? And Triple G hasn't, forget Boo Boo Andrade, Triple G hasn't showed any ambition to do anything aside from wait for Canelo. He wants that Canelo stimulus check. And I don't think he'll be in any hurry to fight Demetrius Andrade. You know, he hasn't shown any ambition to do anything since he lost to Canelo, except fight. You know, he fought Derevyanchenko, got his ass beat, got a good decision. And then he fought Steve Rolls, and he fought Kamil Schmerta. His last two fights tell you what he's doing in his career, which is basically he's content to fight these no-name cannon fodder opposition and get paid for doing nothing. So scratch that out of there. He's not fighting Demetrius Andrade either. Okay, Jaime Munguia, another one. Jaime Munguia has been the #1 fighter in the WBO for, I don't know, what is it? Been about a year, almost 2 years, year and a half. And Golden Boy Promotions has shown no ambition to try to make that fight happen with Munguia and Boo Boo Andrade. So there you have it, man. And then, okay, so you guys are saying he has to do all these things, he has to fight all these people, right? And he's trying to. He's running up on people. He's winning his fights. You guys say he looks bad doing it, but they're not competitive fights. It doesn't matter if he looks bad doing it. They're not competitive fights. Liam Williams was a 9-3, 10-2 fight with a knockdown. Luke Keeler was like about 11-1, 12-0 shutout. Arthur Akavov, 12-0 shutout. Suleski, 11-1, you know, easy fights. He's making these fights easy. He's not in competitive fights. So miss me with the bullshit. And then when you go ahead and you look at what he's doing at 160 or who's in the top 15 at 160, most of the top 15 in the middleweight division at 160 are guys that you've never even heard of. Let's go through them. Patrice Volney, Tyler Howard, David Pappett, Danny Dignam, Denzel Bentley, who just got knocked out by Felix Cash. Felix Cash himself, who's 14th. Miriam Nurazlatanov, Ibrahim, you know, you got guys we never even heard of in the top 15 at 160. 160 is trash. Outside of a couple of fights, there's not a whole lot of options for Demetrius Andrade. And most of the options that people would want to see him fight don't want to fight him. So bringing that back to Canelo, who do you want him to fight? Nobody wants to fight him. They've frozen him out. They blackballed him from boxing, it seems like. So Eddie Hearn, in my opinion, he was the biggest disgrace in this whole situation. The security says that this is not the place. Paul Andrade responded by saying it's always done this way, and he's referring to how he called out Canelo. Yeah, man, like even I don't understand what's going on in boxing, man. You know, I understand Canelo Alvarez is doing this thing right now. Much respect to him. God bless him. But at some point in time, you got to call a spade a spade. And the media is not calling a spade either. I blame the media. I blame the mainstream boxing media for this because they've created an environment for Canelo Alvarez to act like this pampered, spoiled child. You know, and if there was ever symbolism of Canelo's entire boxing career, it was this instance. You had Canelo Alvarez sitting on stage, flanked, sitting next to Eddie Reynoso on his right, Eddie Hearn on his left. So his trainer on one side, his promoter on the other. You got security blocking off Demetrius Andrade, and he's talking his shit from his seat, like a spoiled little rich kid, like a spoiled, entitled, pampered little rich kid. He kind of reminded me of Waldo Aloysius Johnson III from the movie The Little Rascals. That's the kind of attitude he had, because he was talking all that shit about how he would fuck Demetrius Andrade up and how he would do all these things to Demetrius Andrade. But I never saw Canelo Alvarez get down from his seat and try to square up with him. I never saw him talk like that. Because listen, I know Canelo Alvarez is Mexico, he's Mexican warrior, all that stuff. But listen, I don't know where he's from, but where I'm from, when you make threats like that, you gotta back them up. And he didn't try to back them up. You know, he just sat there behind and protected. He sat there protected by his promoter, protected by his trainer, and protected by the security guards, and talked this shit. And it's the same way Canelo Alvarez said that he would fuck with Demetrius Andrade but didn't even move from the podium is the same thing going back to the fans. The fans say Demetrius Andrade hasn't fought nobody. They say he's garbage. They say he's this. They say he's that. But they don't tell Canelo to fight him, because there was no problems when it came to making the Rocky Fielding fight. There was no problems when it came to making Avni Yildirim. There was no problem when he was a younger fighter and he was cherry picking Alfonso Gomez and Kermit Cintron and Carlos Baldemir and all those guys. But when it comes to Demetrius Andrade, there's some sort of double standard. I mean, come on, man. It's getting ridiculous. It's getting ridiculous what's going on with Canelo Alvarez. But yeah, he sat there in his pajamas next to Eddie Hearn, his promoter. Eddie Hearn had that cheeky little smile on his face, that little smirk on his face, because he knows better than anybody that Demetrius Andrade is blackballed from the sport, or that they're trying to blackball him from the sport. And they're trying to prevent him from getting those fights that are gonna make him a household name and allow him to show the world that he's one of the best fighters out there. And Canelo Alvarez sits there from his podium talking all that shit, but never once moved from the podium. Never once came down. Never once tried to back up anything he said. And it goes back to how he is in his boxing career. He can go there and he can say Viva Mexico all he wants. He can say escribiendo la historia all he wants. That he's writing history. But when it comes time to fight those real killers like your Demetrius Andrades, your David Benavidez, your Dimitri Bivol, he don't want no parts of those guys. He had a chance to go undisputed in one of boxing's glamour divisions, one of boxing's original 8 divisions, the middleweight division, one of the original weight classes in boxing. Duck Demetrius Andrade. But another thing that nobody's talking about is that before David Benavidez lost his title on the scale at 168, there was no talk of Canelo Alvarez going undisputed at 168. He only started talking this undisputed bullshit at 168 when David Benavidez lost his title and the landscape favored him. Because let's be real, Callum Smith, weak champion at 168. Billy Joe Saunders, a good fighter, credible fighter, but at 168 hadn't really shown much of himself going into the Canelo fight. Performed well in the Canelo fight, but hadn't shown anything going into the Canelo fight. So you could even say he was a weak champion. Caleb Plant, I think Caleb Plant is probably the toughest fight out of the whole division for him. Honestly, stylistically, maybe he doesn't have the resume of those other guys, but stylistically, the toughest fight out there for Canelo Alvarez at 168. And it's no disrespect to Caleb Plant. I'll be there September, and I'll be rooting for him when that fight happens. But if Caleb Plant is the toughest fight for you in a weight class, then listen, that's a very weak run at 168. And he ducked David Benavidez, and he'll continue. And I'll bet the house. I will bet the house. Canelo Alvarez will continue ducking David Benavidez, because David Benavidez, everyone knows at the current landscape, everyone knows that the biggest threat to Canelo Alvarez, when we talk about who could potentially beat Canelo Alvarez 168, the biggest threat is David Benavidez. He's got the size, the durability, the punching power. He's got every tool under the sun to beat Canelo Alvarez, and I never once heard Canelo call his name ever. So this isn't even just about Demetrius Andrade. This is also about Benavidez. He never talked about undisputed until Benavidez lost that belt, and when he won that belt at 175, and he could have tried to maybe fight a Dimitri Bivol before we could even get the name Bivol out of our mouth. He vacated that belt. So when it comes to those real killers like Demetrius Andrade, David Benavidez, Dimitri Bivol, we know Canelo Alvarez will never run towards those challenges because he's a coward. And listen, I know people are going to unsubscribe. I know I'm going to get a bunch of disrespectful comments. I know people are going to say all these things about Canelo Alvarez, but that's the word I'm going to use because that's the only word I can think of to describe how he's dealt with Demetrius Andrade these last 6 years. Cowardice. Coward, And if he wants me to shut up, then he needs to fight him. He needs to fight the guy and stop ducking him. Because whenever we hear about these other fighters like Callum Smith and all these other guys that aren't on Canelo's level being champions and he's beating them, you're telling me by saying that belts matter, right? But when Demetrius Andrade's a champion, belts don't matter anymore. Now it's all about resume. Now you guys care about resumes. So all I'm asking boxing fans, the boxing media, the boxing establishment, and Canelo Alvarez to do is to keep it consistent because there's blatant double standards when it comes to Demetrius Andrade. I truly believe it'll be the stylistic hardest fight out there for Canelo Alvarez. And the only person that believes that it would be the hardest fight for Canelo Alvarez more than me is Canelo Alvarez himself. Because if he believed that Demetrius Andrade was a horrible fighter, like he said, you're a horrible fighter. You're not that good. You'll never get the fight. If he was truly a horrible fighter, Canelo would have fought him because we've seen him fight lesser guys like Avni Yildirim, Rocky Fielding. So The only way to describe Canelo Alvarez is a coward, because and I don't give a fuck. Listen, I don't give a fuck about how many belts he has. I don't care if you think he's pound for pound number one. I don't care about none of that. Boxing is a sport about who is truly the best. Demetrius Andrade believes he's the best, and he's always believed he was the best since he was an amateur fighter. In 2008, on that 2008 amateur team that had Deontay Wilder and I think Sean Porter on that team. I don't know who was on that team, but like in the 2008 Olympic class for the USA, Demetrius Andrade was hands down the best fighter in the world, the best amateur, one of the best amateurs in the world, and clearly the best amateur in all of America. And people back then coming into the professional ranks thought Demetrius Andrade had everything it took to be a Hall of Famer, a great fighter, the next great American fighter. And unfortunately for him, due to some bad business decisions on his part and the boxing game, the boxing opponents not willing to get in the ring with him, he's been shortchanged in history thus far. And all he's trying to do is make it for lost time and get the fight that he deserved many years ago against Canelo Alvarez. People are saying Canelo Alvarez is the best. Demetrius Andrade disagrees, and he wants to know how good he really is. And he's running up on Canelo Alvarez. He's trying to put some pressure on to make the fight. And Canelo Alvarez, what Canelo Alvarez is basically showing and saying in this interaction is that I don't gotta fight you because I'm the face of boxing. Fuck you. That's what he's saying. And then he's also saying too, when he says that Demetrius Andrade hasn't fought nobody, let's take some time to analyze that statement. Because when Canelo Alvarez says that Demetrius Andrade hasn't fought anybody, he's also saying that he hasn't fought anybody. He doesn't realize that by discrediting Demetrius Andrade, he's discrediting himself. He's saying that he himself hasn't fought anybody. Because by saying Demetrius Andrade hasn't fought anybody, you're saying that Daniel Jacobs isn't shit. Because Sulecki fought Jacobs and gave Jacobs one of the hardest fights of his career. Daniel lost to Sulecki. So Daniel Jacobs isn't shit. So you just said Daniel Jacobs isn't shit. You're also saying that Liam Smith isn't shit because Liam Smith fought Liam Williams twice and won life and death with him. So Liam Smith isn't shit. You're saying that Billy Joe Saunders, who you just fought, isn't shit because Demetrius Andrade destroyed Akavov, didn't lose one round against him, and Billy Joe won life and death, and Daniel lost his title to him. So by saying that he hasn't fought nobody, you're saying that you haven't fought nobody, and you're also saying that you're also disrespecting all the fighters that are climbing through those ropes and got in the ring. He doesn't respect boxing. He may say he respects boxing. He may say no boxing, no life. He may say he's creating history. He may say all these things. But when it comes down to respecting the fighters and when it comes down to respecting his competitors around him, he doesn't respect them. And he thinks he's above boxing. He thinks he's above boxing. He thinks he's above everybody. And fuck him. Fucking Alvarez. I'm gonna say it. Fucking Alvarez. He's a coward. And my energy will stay the same. It will not change. And this is the fight I want to see. Canelo Alvarez can shut me up real quick by fighting Demetrius Andrade and defeating him, because this is the most ridiculous thing in boxing. Most times when a fighter calls another fighter out for this long of a period of time, the fight would have been happened already. But in the case of Canelo Alvarez, it doesn't happen because he's scared of Demetrius Andrade. He's scared because he knows at 6'1", with punching power on both hands, rangy, fast, agile, can switch. It's a stylistic nightmare for him. It is a stylistic nightmare for Canelo Alvarez. He wants to go there and, plot, be a slow plotter, plot his feet, explode on the inside, throw those big, hard combinations that are going to really put a beating on his opponents. And he knows with Demetrius Andrade, he's not going to be able to do that as much. So just the thought of that makes him not want to fight him. And luckily for him, he's got a lot of fans on his side. The media has done a good job of brainwashing the boxing fans and everything. And he has built-in excuses already. He can say, oh, he's boring. He hasn't fought nobody. And he can just hide behind that. But people like myself, people who have been watching boxing, who are objective, who can look at things for how they are and not for how they wish to be, we know that you don't want to fight him. We know that you're ducking him. And we know that if push comes to shove and you do have to fight him, it'll be the hardest fight of your career since Floyd Mayweather. And you know that more than anybody, which is why you continue to avoid him. So I'm going to leave it at that. You guys can leave your comments down below. I'm sure I'll get a lot of them. But I'll leave it at this. Canelo Alvarez is a coward. He's a disgrace to boxing. And he's acting like a spoiled a spoiled rich kid who thinks he should have everything go his way. So leave your comments down below. Take time to subscribe like I say in every single one of these videos. I don't give a damn if you do love me, but you can love me or you can hate me. But I'm just Kid from Daniel. So until next time, take care, guys. Stop ducking, boo-boo.